Gary Laney, welcome to the Leading Saints podcast.
Hey, thank you so much, Kurt. It's nice to have gotten to know you and finally be on your show. So thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, and in some of our prep here, you talk about you've had some interesting interactions or mentorship from some people early on in your career, like Steven Covey, President Monson, and President Ballard. What's the story there?
I probably should start with Steven Schallenberger because Steven, you know
Oh
Steven.
yes, yeah, he's a former guest.
So I went to work for him as a college student, and was probably my first foray, first introduction, to influential people. Even though I'd met, people in the church that were influential, but Stephen Covey I'd never met before. He'd been a professor of mine. I'd read his book on my mission called Spiritual Roots of Human Relations. And most people don't know that book was kind of the precursor to Seven Habits. There's some of the same illustrations in both books. But so during my stint with Eagle, which ran the span of about 10 years, started as a salesman and kind of worked up in the ranks to a district manager, regional manager, an area sales director, and then became a VP of sales. And in the process of raising in the ranks, I got to know all these amazing people, including President Thomas Monson, who in very small kind of management firesides back when the church was kind of supportive of that, in Lake Tahoe and some places, just in a real fireside, with real fire. Had some great, amazing experiences learning things about him. Stephen Covey, from Scholastic at BYU to advisory role and to learning about his book, which hadn't been published yet. Seven Habits didn't get published until 1989. I met him in 1979. And so my salespeople, Steven Schallenberger's salespeople, became kind of the guinea pigs for those concepts. I remember him saying, "Hey, I want to share some concepts with you, some habits." We had no idea where it was going to go, but it became famous, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of where that happened, and I met other great people you may not have heard of before, like Bill Jones and Lael Woodbury, who was the Dean of Fine Arts at BYU. Some amazing people. So it was a great experience those 10 years.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, maybe if you're under 30 and maybe under 40, you don't realize that back in the day, apostles and general authorities, they could like sit on boards of directors.
Board of director, board advisor. They did.
For different companies, right? For-profit companies. That was maybe an additional way that they helped sustain their mission as an apostle, right?
Yeah, it's really true. And Thomas Monson was amazing because he started as an apostle, and then became prophet. But the days of him being involved were spectacular. He didn't just come one time. He came to many of our management retreats, and I got to know his wife a little bit. It was just a remarkable experience. Same thing, Stephen Covey, for 10 years. Very, very involved with him in a lot of ways, to the point where he became a mentor, of mine and very helpful to me, kind of structuring my career and my life. So yeah, it was a different time back then.
Yeah. And just from a Latter-day Saint leadership standpoint, I don't think we sometimes emphasize enough just the impact that Stephen Covey has even today, of his thought, the mentorship he gave to so many people. Even on this podcast, we've had numerous people who were mentored by him, either through working for him with his companies. We've had his, Stephen M.R. Covey on a couple times, that these individuals that still perpetuate really solid leadership principles throughout the world and in the church.
Yeah.
Even though Stephen Covey's passed on, and but his influence just carries on.
No, it doesn't surprise me you say that, because everywhere he went, he made people think and contemplate, what he was talking about. He's a very deep individual with an amazing smile. That drew people into him. You could be in his presence. You should be intimidated, but you weren't, right? He was just that kind of a person.
That's cool. So any specific principles or concepts that you learned from any of those men that you mentioned that would be worth mentioning in this context?
Oh, I don't think we have enough time to go through all that. But Stephen Covey, just his life, his example, the way he looked at life and the way he wanted to contribute from the very beginning. He was a mission president when he was like 26, 28. I forget what his age was exactly. A bishop when he was like 22. I don't know. And Thomas Monson, kind of the same thing, a stake president when he was like 30, 31. I don't know the exact year, but it was very close to that kind of thing. So the way they exemplified, they led from the beginning. They just had that capacity to do that. Just remarkable. I mean, Stephen Covey with his habits, there are a few of my favorites. Begin with the end in mind is probably my most favorite because it's all about how you think about the future, and so you can prepare and do the best possible job. And along the way, what I learned from him obviously are, how do you develop relationships? Of course, he talks about win-win, but I mean, on a meaningful basis, that's when I first read the book Spiritual Roots of Human Relations. Then I took him as a professor for organizational behavior class. It was an option at BYU. And didn't know if I could get into his class. There were like 400, people trying to get in there. Thousands wanted to be in there, and he was like the first Donahue. I mean, he could go out, he could just relate and make eye contact and connect with you on a personal basis. And then later, I got a chance to know him on a one-on-one basis, which was remarkable. But Thomas Monson, I have favorite sayings. There was a favorite poem that he used to give. I don't. They always put anonymous on it, but I don't know if he helped write it. It's called "Stick to Your Task." Have you heard that poem
I
before?
haven't. Uh-uh.
See if I know it by memory, because I used to give it to every salesperson I ever taught. So stick to your task till it sticks to you. Beginners are many, but enders are few. Honor, power, place, and praise will always come to the one who stays. So stick to your task till it sticks to you. Bend at it, sweat at it, and smile at it too. For out of the bend and the sweat and the smile will come life's victories after a while. I've
Mm.
known that since 1980, 81. I've recited it many times. And I hadn't even thought about it until you invited me on the show, and it just came right back to me. I mean, it's just such a great poem.
Yeah. And is there any, like, I don't know if there's personal experience that come to mind, or as you're, leading groups of people, like where do you see that principle most needed? Or because it is, there's some, maybe you get apathetic towards a certain task, or it becomes, so routine. Sometimes you lose that stick to itiveness, if that's a word we're going to use.
Well, it's always, for me, it's about finishing something you started. So
Mhm.
start with Stephen Covey's begin with the end in mind. Before you even begin, you have a perspective, and I'm going to talk about perspectives and things in my book, which are kind of extrapolations from things I learned from Stephen Covey and Thomas Monson, Lael Woodbury, all these great individuals. But I grew up in an environment, I grew up in a family business where the entire family worked in this retail business. And my mom would work there half day, then go home and do all the things she had to do as a mom. She's an incredible mom. But my dad, taught us that we start something, you finish it. You don't begin something and then cut out. You just don't do that. And that was the nature of my learning from the time I was a little kid. I would come from elementary school to my dad's store. I didn't go home, and he would give me tasks of things to do. And in the beginning, he'd give me a list, and I got a little smart and thought I could work through this really fast, and I could go home sooner. And then I didn't realize my dad would give me a second list and a third list. So I decided I'm going to do this list really well, and then hope that it was good enough that he would say, "Go home and thank you for your help." And so from the time I was a kid, learning those tasks, the importance of doing things well. My dad would always say, if you're going to do something, do it well. There's no reason to start something. There's no reason to do something unless you're going to do it well. And he was a great example of that. He was a businessman, not as much of a spiritual man until maybe later in his life. And my mom was kind of filled the gap, but really remarkable man that taught me about honesty, which is that integrity part, doing things right, doing it well, and finishing it. That's the integrity of what you really exemplify as a person.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about, you wrote a book called Strategic Intelligence, right? Or I'm sorry, Strategic Influence.
Well, I should
And
have I should have talked to you first because you have some good names.
hey, well, I better go buy that domain name so you don't.
I'm going to show it to you. So it's called
Okay.
the Power
Oh,
of
okay.
Strategic Influence. So it's all about influence. So Stephen Covey taught me what influence was about, and I extended those principles over about a 35-year period, teaching the 7 habits, but then coming up with practical ways to apply them. Stephen he's very theoretical, and he would get practical in a live session, but his book wasn't so much.
Hmm.
So I had to figure out, how do I make this practical so that it actually can be used? It can actually help the performance of the people that I managed. And so over those 35 years, I extended the principles. I came up with my own what I call spheres of influence, 6 of them. Stephen talked about circles. I like spheres better because it's three-dimensional. It's all encompassing. You can step into a circle and step out of it. I know he didn't think of it that way, but for me, it was kind of that way. I wanted it to be something you're committed to, and especially in relationships where you're looking at each other on a three-dimensional way that looks in the future. Again, back to Steven's principles.
Yeah, well, I'm curious, with this, the word influence, especially in 2023 when we're recording this, we live in the age of the influencer, right? And
We do,
so
yeah.
sometimes we lose meaning in these words because they become too cliche or whatnot. And so when you talk about influence as a leader, like what else can we unpack there?
So I'm going to distinguish the reason when I first started this book, I was calling it The Power of Influence. And I just didn't feel like there was enough distinction in that name for people to understand what I was trying to teach. Because social media influencers are out there on a one-time basis many times, very transactional versus relationship or future or strategic minded. So strategic to me means, oh, okay, just like that task we're talking about, I'm not just meeting you for one experience. If we have a connection, if there's chemistry between us, if there's a reason why we should be, working together to help us on that win-win basis, then it ought to be strategic. It means there should be a purpose on my side and your side, where
Hmm.
we feel like together, if you integrate the two, we have something that could become remarkable together. And so I don't know about you, but when I connect with people today, I have a profile of people type of a person, not specific people, maybe sometimes, but a profile of the type of person I want to connect with that I think I can give value to and they can reciprocate. So strategic to me means I am going to do things in a way that's actually meaningful, that's fitted, that has potential and future attached to it. And so then as you become a leader and today this concept of servant leadership, which I'd love to talk about, but is that, I really care about providing value to you, and I'm trying not to be calculated about it. I want to be able to provide something that's meaningful to you. I want to give to you, and if it makes sense, it'll reciprocate to me. And so I'm
Hmm.
going to focus on the giving part, not be so calculated on the receiving part. And I've done that throughout my life, starting with the people that really trained me: my mother, my father, my mission president, great people, my brother, and then on to people like Steven Covey, Thomas Monson. Gordon B. Hinckley was an amazing example to me. He came to our mission. I got to look at him eye to eye for about 2 minutes as he met every missionary in my mission, which I thought was remarkable. He took the time to do that. It took hours. So to me, it's all about developing relationships that give you where you can make impact and add value, which creates influence because people then trust you, they like you, they want to follow you for the right reasons, not because you want to become a big influencer, because you want reputation or you want to become a narcissist. That's not at all about what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the end all be all where I can maximize my potential as an individual. And that has a lot to do with how I treat people and how I
Yeah.
help people solve problems, really is what it's about. So
So if you were coaching maybe a brand new bishop or elders quorum president or at least society president to step into that cadence of leadership, like what does that look like on the ground for somebody in an award setting?
So it has a lot to do with it because in churches, in our church, we teach the importance of leadership. Start with becoming a teacher. How do you teach things so that people will learn, the essence of it? I mean, Stephen Covey would say, if you want to learn this principle, go out and teach it to someone. I keep coming back to Stephen. Best thing you can do is teach a concept to someone and practice it, and then teach it again and practice it and teach it again because then it'll become part of you. But in the church, sometimes people get into callings, and I'm not being critical, but they don't think about what they're saying or doing, and and the people that are surrounding them, because a lot of times there's lots of listening ears in the church, and you can not say, I'm not getting on the offensive part, but you can maybe say something you didn't mean to say because you didn't think about it ahead of time. So
Hmm.
beginning with that end in mind, what do I want to accomplish? What do I want as a purpose for this meeting, for our relationship, for this teaching moment? If you can have some idea before you go into it, and then ask the person, what do you want to get out of this? We don't do that a lot of times. We just jump into it, ad hoc, very haphazard, and blow our way through it because it's a volunteer position. And I think that if you took a time and a moment, to just think about what should I be relaying here, what should I be teaching, and what's the end result of what I'm trying to get to, I think it'll be a better experience. I really do. And I've experienced that as a ward mission leader, as a gospel doctrine teacher, as a bishopric member many times, as a high priest group leader. I mean, I've been fortunate to have had some, really amazing callings. But the moments I probably that meant the most to me were where I was actually trying to befriend and to teach something of value to the person I was with and thinking about them as a person, how it might benefit them. And I
Yeah.
haven't always done that, but I think it does make a difference.
And I imagine, I mean, just as I perceive it, it seems like that the administrative monster sort of eats all these principles up sometimes because, the bishopric just needs to get the ward
Yeah,
staffed,
yeah,
and rarely is that. And this, I've been writing and thinking about this concept of the role of callings in a ward. And oftentimes, the bishopric comes to you with a calling and said, hey, listen, this is what we came up with. Yes or no, and we would really appreciate it if he said yes, but never is there sort of this dialogue of exploration with that member where they feel like they have a role in it. It's more of they're being acted upon by this calling, and they got to say yes, and now that's their role in the ward for 6 to 3 years or whatever.
yeah. I appreciate that perspective, Kurt, but I have had some experiences. For example, a bishop I can think of in California that I served under as a ward mission leader. He was, first of all, he'd been a sales management leader.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and I interviewed him for my book. His name was Gary Kennedy, so maybe telling you too much, but he was an amazing person and influencer to me as a bishop
Hmm.
because number one, he took my interest at heart, and so when we got together, he would ask me what I wanted to accomplish, what I wanted to do, and he was very supportive of it. And when something happened that was good, and we do this in sales a lot. A good sales leader would do this. We'll come back and give reinforcement and give credence to what just happened, and give support and say that's remarkable that just happened. How do we help that person? Now become a member of the church if that's possible. So I think that's critical. But I think you're right though, that haphazard thing, which because we get busy and it's volunteer and we just show up and we haven't had any time to prepare, it's sometimes hard to not do something that might not become as productive as you'd like it to be.
Yeah.
So anyway, I
Yeah.
think the leaders that do it will have a better experience. I had a stake president in California, different stake that was amazing. That he was just so warm. He was so kind. He had such a great bedside manner, and he's an attorney. You don't expect that from an attorney all the time, but he was remarkable. And when I had an opportunity to meet with President Nelson one time because I was in the state high council, and he asked me, as a wonderful, pensive, thoughtful leader would be, who do you think should be the stake president? He didn't drill me and try to make me feel like I was being interviewed. I didn't feel like I was interviewed at all. He wanted my suggestion. He wanted my recommendation. And in the end, he took my recommendation, I guess. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that recommended this person
Right.
who became, the stake president, and that wonderful guy that I'm talking about. But I so appreciated how President Nelson made me feel in his presence. It was remarkable.
Yeah.
I've never forgotten that experience. I was with him one-on-one for 20 minutes, and you're only supposed to be in those meetings for 5 minutes. And so everybody
Yeah.
thought are you, I know I'm not the stake president. Grateful I wasn't, but a remarkable thing that leaders can do if they take the time to use their heart and their spirit, to do the right things.
Yeah. And what I'm learning from this, and maybe it's something I've probably learned before and need to keep reminding myself of, is that like influence, it takes some work to really earn it, right? Because sometimes in a tradition that has a strong tradition on priesthood keys and authority, sometimes it's like, hey, I'm the bishop. They put their hands on my head, like here we go, like this is what we're doing. But there's so much to gain for taking the time to sit down with people and look at them eye to eye and really earn that influence.
Well, so one of the things I talk about in my book toward the end is I say, first of all, the title of influencer cannot be self-proclaimed.
Hmm.
Title of leader can't be self-proclaimed. Title of bishop can't be self-proclaimed. You can't stand up and I'm, this authoritative person now, because authority doesn't ring well with people. It's the warmth, it's the influence, the natural, the genuine attitude and actions of the person that draws you to them, right? That genuine, authentic feel. We talk about authenticity today. That's really a true concept if you really look into it. But a lot of people use it very, randomly. But yeah, I really believe that influence is earned, and it has to be earned, and it's bestowed. I say in my book, it's bestowed upon you by the people that really sense and see the leadership in you, and what they look for is what you're trying to do to help all of them. If
Hmm.
it's all about you, I don't think that influence happens very well, personally.
Yeah. And so, anything else you'd add? I mean, because as far as I'm thinking, like if somebody wants to really aim for that influence and to earn that title of influencer, I mean, that one-to-one interaction with as many people that you lead as possible. Is there anything else that you generally coach people on as far as how to gain that influence?
Well, this concept I'm going to share is so simple. It doesn't sound like it should be, you know, deep at all, but it really is, and that is just to give first.
Hmm.
That's from the beginning of my book. At the end, my last chapter is called "Give Back." But what I really teach from the beginning is you should start to give back from the beginning before you have wealth. People think you have to have wealth to give back. You have to have, amazing contacts to which do help to make a difference in someone's life. But no, you're just your time, your attention, your ability to listen, and to maybe give a perspective to someone so they can even solve the problem themselves. If you can solve the problem quickly because you just can, why not do it? And
Hmm.
then the person said, listen, in the future, here's some ideas. You can do it yourself. But I'm taking care of this right now because I can see the anguish. I can see the distraught. I can see the frustration you have. I want to just take care of this for you just because I can. And so I think that is where it really stems, giving back, but giving first. I mean, Christ, we loved him because he loved us first, right? I mean, that's the whole premise that I've used. Try not to get emotional here for a second.
Yeah.
My mother, taught me that. She was so kind to everyone. I mean, every day. Wow, didn't expect this, Kurt. Got me in a
You're
vulnerable
fine.
position.
Hey, we don't mind
I
a
don't
little
usually do
emotion
this in
here.
podcasts, but I don't get a chance to talk about the church very often. But my mother, oh my goodness, was a remarkable person. I've never met probably a more kind person than she was. My dad was very charismatic and kind in his own way as a businessman. But my mother, just from the outset, she waved to everybody. I said, and I later in life, I said, did she really all know all those people? I'm sure she did not, even though a lot of people knew her. She didn't want someone to think that she didn't wave to them if she didn't recognize them, because those cars go past you pretty quick.
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes, do I know them? Can I see them? She didn't ever worry about that. She'd wave first. She was always giving me stuff to take to the neighbors, always bread, cookies, peaches. Um, so
Yeah.
miss that woman a lot. So that's all I can say.
Yeah. Well, and the principle rings true. Just that give first, and and I believe in that wholeheartedly. I also worry sometimes as leaders, especially in the church, where this is a volunteer effort, that we give almost overgive, right, and we sort of drain ourselves empty
Yeah, that's a good point.
because we've given so much, and then we have nothing to offer anybody because it's all been given away, right? Is there any balance to that, or anything come to mind?
Well, I think that, yeah, I mean, you can be generous, and if you have the means, those people like to do it, and I think it's very well received. But if that's all you do, I think that's not enough. Sounds like that's crazy, but because you're giving means, you're giving, monetary, help to people, or gifts in their own right. But I really think it's the person, that stops and thinks, what does this person really need? What could I do? Even a small thing that might remind them and make them smile when they get down. What could I do? And so, I'll just share, this is taking me way back to my mission in 1976 to 78. That was a long time ago. I heard a missionary one time say, was training me, we should go in and focus on only making this a better day for them than had they not met us.
Mm,
So, yes, we have a lesson to teach. Yes, we would like to invite them to church. Yes, we'd like to be invited back. But let's just focus on making this a better day because they met us. That's it. And I've never forgotten that. And so, for every door I knocked on from that point forward, I thought, okay, that's my only goal. I want to make this experience where they're happy I came by, not, distraught because the missionaries knocked on their door, and now they're worried there's obligations. We're going to come back. No, I don't want that. I want them to feel happy that we came by. That's it. And I was able to connect with Catholic priests on my mission, had experiences with, and amazing people that never became members of the church, but I know that I helped them in a sense
Yeah.
every single
Yeah.
time if I could.
Oh, that's such a great mindset, for a leader, because it is easy to sort of get stuck to key indicators and goals and efforts, and hey, we got to really motivate this group of people, and I'm going to stand up in front of them one more time and remind them, hey, we got to really double down here. But to walk into every scenario of like, no, I'm a giver, I'm a helper, I'm going to lift people up rather than bog them down with more reminders, or cracking the whip or whatever it is.
So I love the lift bird you just said. I have a
Yeah.
book back behind me written by Thomas Kuzmarski and his wife Susan. He's written 8 books. He was my mentor at Northwestern when I went to get my MBA, Kellogg. And they wrote this book not because this guy's a genius of marketing, but he and his wife wrote a book about lifting others
Hmm.
because that's the kind of person he is. And he's been a friend of mine since I did an internship for him in 1985. And I wasn't a remarkable employee, I don't think, as a student, but he's been remarkable to me back, and lifted me so many times when he didn't have to respond to me because he's kind of famous, this guy, especially in Chicago. So yeah, I think that lift concept is just
Hmm.
tremendous. I love it.
Yeah, really good stuff. And you've touched on around this concept of servant leadership. I mean, that's essentially what we're talking about. What other caveat have we not touched on?
Well, so you know, I thought servant leadership when I first heard it a few years ago, and that's kind of where it became popular. It really started in 1970 with a guy named Greenleaf who wrote a book about it, and he called it the service of leader. And it became servant leadership later, but it was really construed and developed as a concept back in late by Lao Cha, who's a Chinese philosopher. I mean, like 1,500 years ago,
Oh, wow.
who talked about I just kind of rephrase the concept because I don't have the quote in front of me, but he basically said that the true leader is someone that is barely noticed. And the fruits of his labors as a leader, again, I'm just paraphrasing, are that people think they did it themselves.
Hmm.
But he actually helped them, accomplish something. He wanted to be invisible, but be a person that was guiding, directing. It goes back to that concept of facilitating. So I've led many discussions. I've spoken at a lot of, hundreds of places. But the best discussions, the best environment is where you have a facilitator who doesn't come in and lecture. They help bring out the ideas, the responses, the emotions of the people in the room as if the leader wasn't there, as if the facilitator didn't exist. Same
Hmm.
concept as Lao Tzu. So I think it's important because servant leadership means it's not about me. I'm about helping others reach their potential, reach their goals, accomplish what they need to. And as a leader, if they did that and they all feel proud of it and I could step away and it didn't matter, I mean, that would be there's a lot of ego in leadership, right? So I think
Hmm.
that's hard to do sometimes, but I think in the end, that's really what we're trying to do.
Yeah. And even projecting that onto a church context, I'm just thinking, oftentimes, I get an opportunity to speak a lot, firesides and youth firesides, and uh, on cruise ships sometimes, about gospel related things. And it's so easy to, try and be as gregarious as possible and personable and, put on a good show. But I often sometimes remind myself before walking on that stage or standing before that lectern that I hope that they forget about me and always remember Jesus, right? Like if we can not only be the leader
Yeah.
that it's forgotten, but that also perpetuates Jesus and his message that he's remembered, then I think we've struck it that balance well, right?
Well, it's a quick experience because it's on my top of mind for me right now. I just got invited by the last person that I helped get baptized. I said I helped get baptized because I didn't baptize him, even though he
Uh,
asked me to baptize him. because I felt like leaving the mission, I should have someone in the ward. It was a branch back then, who, first of all, could have the experience of baptizing someone, and then have this person I had taught, who with my best friend. Well, he invited me to his 50th anniversary, and I called my companion, said, "You have to come." So
Oh,
he's trying to
wow.
work it out so we can both go.
And where'd you serve your mission?
Where? Sorry, in Seville, Spain.
Oh, okay,
So
great.
it was, now it's called the Malaga Mission, which I was mad about. They shouldn't have changed the name, but because I thought Seville was the ultimate. But anyway, so I was working at a place called Alicante. I was a zone leader with my friend Russ, who became a true friend. And so this guy had gone through many, many churches. And when I met him, it was just a referral from a sister missionary that met him in a park. And I took the referral with my companion who was leaving in a week, its own leader, and we knocked on the door, and he was studying with the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I have no problem with them. I have a lot of friends that are Jehovah's Witnesses, but they were really leading him down a path that he was uncomfortable with. So when he heard our message, it was like, wow, this is refreshing,
Hmm.
and we don't have to argue. so so we went around this thing, and finally got to the point where he accepted baptism. And the day we went to pick him up, he went to open the door. We had the font ready. There were portable fonts. We had to ship it in on a bus. It took a lot of work to get baptism ready back then. Long story short, we run back to his house. I mean, we knocked on the door. He wouldn't answer, so we went to a telephone booth. Didn't have cell phones in the day. Called, and he answered the phone, but he said, "I just can't get baptized today. I've met with my other friends, and I'm confused, and so I can't do it today." So we arranged to go back, and we kind of started from scratch. Said, let's forget about the lessons. Let's forget about everything else. Let's talk about what's important to him and his family. Let's just show love. And the thing that I think made a difference is we decided to kneel down and pray. And he had 5 kids at the time, or he had 4, and one was expecting. They ended up with 7. It's a big family for a family in Spain. And we knelt down and we prayed, every family member and the missionaries around the circle, until he felt like it was time to stop. And he says, "I'm ready to get baptized." It was
Wow.
just an amazing experience. So I think that immediately brought to mind that I wanted to baptize this guy so badly. I loved him so much. I wanted to get in that font with him, And, but it was more important for him to be baptized by somebody from his branch that he could create a relationship with, because I was going to go away, and I wouldn't be back for 35 years. I've been back several times since then, but it took 35 years to get back.
Wow.
And so he has become an amazing leader in the church. And I think he's paid it forward so many times to hundreds and hundreds of people. He's been bishop 3 times. I mean, he's an amazing person. So my companion and I get to go back and be together. We've both been with him separately with our wives. Now we get to be together. I think it's going to work out. It's going to be a
Oh,
remarkable
that's cool.
reunion.
So 50 years in the church he's celebrating. Wow.
50 years in his marriage.
Oh, in his
Sorry, I
marriage.
didn't say
Okay.
that. His anniversary. And so we're going back, and he's bringing all his family together. It's a big deal, but he invited his missionaries, which I thought was pretty cool.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
no, he's been a member of the church since 1978. So what is that? That's 40 some years. But
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's fantastic. What a story. And I just love that from that story, just like creating space to you didn't push them into the font or, try and, bribe them into the font or anything, but you're just, let's create space for this and breathe into it and pray about it and see where it leads us, and we can, worst case, we can walk away and try another day.
well, I will tell you though that when we went by to pick him up the first time, we were so worried that he
Yeah.
would just, not ever get baptized. Something would really went wrong, And but after we slowed down, and he was loving back to us, he says, "Don't worry. That's just I'm confused. So let's get together and talk about it." And things went beautifully, and he made the decision. He's never turned back, never looked back one time. Amazing,
Yeah. That's
amazing guy.
awesome.
Not everybody does that. But
Yep.
I taught a lot of people in Spain that left the church, and but this guy's been rock solid. He's continued to inspire me my whole life.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Well, going back to the strategic influence, any other principle or concept that would really be of help to church leaders?
Well, so I have 6 spheres, which I think are
Okay.
all very relatable to church leadership. And it starts with perspective. That's that Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. I call it perspective. And it's about counting the costs up front, committing to something and not looking back, that stick to itiveness that you and I first talked about, that
Hmm.
stick to your task until it sticks to you. So that first beginning sphere, I think is very, very, very important. You don't get anywhere unless you have the right perspective, unless someone does it for you. The second sphere is accountability. In the church, we teach, the importance of being honest and true and chaste and all the things we talk about. That means you're accountable and that you are responsible for what that accountability means. Next one is about it goes into relationships, and so it's immediately applicable if you are learning how to become accountable, and people then trust you that they want to follow you or have some form of relationship with you. It's just natural. All these steps are natural. From the relationships, you learn how to become, because people mandate it at that point, because they trust you, they want to bestow that influential title on you, and they want you to be their leader. And so some people won't accept it, but if you do and you accept it fully, saying, I assume the role, I accept the role, then you become a leader that is loved and beloved by people. And, I've tried really hard to be a good leader in my life, and I've managed a few thousand people, and I've taught thousands more. And I've had a few that have come up to me and saying I was the best leader they've ever had before. That meant so much to me for them to tell me that, not because I wanted to stick it in a post on LinkedIn. I wanted to just know that I was making a difference. And to some teachers that I taught when I was going to Northwestern, the teachers quorum, every one of them went on missions. I never expected that because some of them weren't ever very close to it, I didn't think. But because of the class and the collaborative nature of our class, I think I made a difference. And every one of them called me before they went. I didn't even track them. They called me. So that leadership, I think, is so important. And then the final two, just quickly. Next one is opportunity. Once you learn how to become a leader and you understand it and you realize it and you accept the responsibility that you've been tasked with, then there's opportunity to influence a lot of people for the right reasons. Look at what Jesus did, in just 33 years. I mean, no one will ever match that. But
True.
I mean, nor should we even try. But I think that his example will never ever go away, and it's mind-boggling to me that people want to put him in the class of a prophet or a teacher. When he was bigger than anything we can ever imagine. And the final one is give back. I told you about that before. Is to give back. It's about helping others when you can. Sometimes you have to wait, to give a physical or monetary means. But in the beginning, you don't have to wait. You can start from the very beginning, showing interest, listening, consoling people, loving people, and you're giving big time, probably more than the money will ever mean. So those are my 6 spheres.
Love it. Talk to me a little bit about accountability. I don't have the quote right in front of me, but John Maxwell, the leadership
Yeah,
author, he talks about that you never really know how good of a leader you are until you lead a volunteer organization where you don't have the levers of bonuses or salary
that's
or,
a good point.
those types of things. So what can you teach us about accountability in the context of leading in the church?
Well, I have 2 success factors that belong to that sphere. And the first one is personal responsibility, accepting personal responsibility. The second one um, is to become responsible or self-reliant, so that you know that you can take care of yourself and then help other people. It's like in the airplane. They tell you put your mask on first because if you don't have oxygen, you can't help someone else. So responsibility to me is something I learned way back when, not from a church member. Well, I learned from my parents, okay, but I'm talking about the concept of what I call accepting personal responsibility, even when you don't think you're responsible. That's the real key here. I was driving down a freeway, all these things come in my mind, in California. I was coming back from a sales appointment in LA when I lived in Los Angeles area. I was coming back and I was getting close to home, and suddenly I heard all these honks from cars around me. People were honking. And I'm looking around, people left to right. Why are they honking? They were honking at me because there was a person who had collapsed in his car, head down on his steering wheel, heading right towards me, and his car was going to crash with me. And so I
Wow.
luckily saw him, got forward enough that I didn't get hit, and his car stopped and hit the median, and apparently taking his foot off the gas, thankfully. And I was able to go and call 911 and help this guy. But the important part about responsibility is I didn't cause that, and and that was a distraction to me at the time, but an important one. I tried to see if I could save the guy. He was already gone, unfortunately.
Mm.
But I took the responsibility, even though I didn't cause it. I wasn't really responsible for that. I'm not I think a paramedic is what I was thinking.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But I felt like it was my responsibility because I was involved to take ownership for that situation. So you imagine something happens to you, whatever it is, and you don't feel responsible, but should you take ownership for it? That's really the key.
Mm.
The key to personal responsibility and accepting it is how you respond to it and how you react to the responsibility of what you think is at hand. Harry Truman always had that thing on his desk that said, the buck stops here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think someone gave that to him, but he liked it. And so he made that kind of his mantra. But he took it seriously. And so even though something's put on your desk and you didn't cause it, you didn't start it, and you want to push it back to the person, if you can help, you should. And you should take ownership for it, because otherwise you might get stuck in a rut. You might start blaming people, and you can't move away or move forward until you take ownership. And so you have to in a way that helps you add, help and help solve the problem, but then move on so it doesn't stick you. So one other really quick illustration. When I was a missionary, I remember my companion and I were getting ready to go across the road. We're at a stoplight and a crosswalk. And this car, the light went red, and this car came zooming through the red light. There was a Spaniard next to us who was really upset that happened, even though he wasn't even trying to cross the road. He was walking down the sidewalk. He went down that road with his arms, like the Spaniards do, cussing about that guy in that car for the rest of the day, maybe, who knows how long. But listen, things happen. You can't let that stop you. You can't let it affect your life to the point where it disturbs what you're trying to accomplish. You have to take ownership of your situation, create a new plan, and move forward. That's this pivot idea, which is what I'm talking about, is important in the church too, because you can become overwhelmed in your duties in the church. You can be overwhelmed in things that happen. I've been in many bishoprics. I've been a branch president. I've had the opportunities to help people, and sometimes it's overwhelming because you don't know how to solve it. You're not a psychologist. You don't know how to solve this monetary problem, or you do the best you can and you find other people. Your job is help find other people that can help that person. But
Yeah.
anyway, I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah. So. Sort of the sense of like having that accountability, being the person who wants to take on accountability and live up to it. Is there anything you would say as far as like someone standing in front of elders quorum where they feel like apathy is slowly taking over everybody's life in the church? And is there any way to stimulate accountability in others, or is it sort of their personal journey they're on?
I mean, so number one example, my mother, my dad, people I know that I trust, I love, are examples. And that doesn't go unnoticed, especially if it's a regular part of their practice, right? And so what a leader should do in a quorum like that, I think, should try to bring out examples of the people in the quorum, not just talk about yourself all the time, which is your first thought is, I always tell personal experiences because it makes a big difference. And yes, it's true, but I think it's more interesting when you bring variety into that with other people in the group. The more you can, as a facilitator, again, back to that idea, bring out, what the capability of that group, what you have in front of you is, their examples, their ideas, their agreements. Then you start a discussion between them, and you can kind of step away. That's the cool part about teaching that I love. So I think that's how you do it. And I think that, it doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to someone if there's a problem. If there's a question, answer the question. I have hecklers in my speeches all the time. People come up with something to give you some hard, question because they just want to give you a hard time. And I want to be like Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you know who Jordan Peterson is, but that guy, you cannot stump that guy. He's going to come back with a mind-boggling response that you could just write. He's just a script. You just want to record the guy, and there's a book every time. He's amazing. Steven Covey was a lot like that too. So
yeah, I really appreciate that that tactic of like sharing examples, because I think we hear we hear, first it starts with example. So we think, okay, as the Elders Quorum president, I'm going to be really accountable to all things I've been asked to do. And hopefully those around me start noticing just how good I am being at doing these things. And then naturally they'll do them. But it's a few more steps where you're highlighting individuals maybe in the quorum who are having these dynamic experience with ministering, or whatever it is, with the gospel principle, or with being a dad, or what, and highlighting that, not to then shame everybody they should do the same, but you're just highlighting it, saying, wow, that's fantastic, tell us about it. And that example will stir something in another 5-10 people, and then you'll have more examples down the road that slowly but surely they're seeing the mission and vision in all this.
Yeah, I much prefer those kind of discussions versus here are the 10 questions. I just handed them out and read the scripture and then give me a response.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say, well, why don't you give me an example of how that applies to you in your life, or anybody can think of an example how that might be applicable, versus here's my theoretical, theological response, which can be good. I think those are good too, because we don't know all the answers, but I think examples help you see that it can be possible to accomplish those things. We're commanded to be perfect. I have no idea how I would ever get past all the trespasses and the problems that I have.
Yeah.
Because I'm way far away from the dock, as Bob says on What About Bob? I just don't think you can do it without people relating to things that others have done, so you can see the possibility and the potential in doing it.
Yeah, and really creating that space. I mean, I worry sometimes, just talking in the context of Elders Quorum Relief Society, sometimes we jump into that lesson a little bit too quickly, right? Rather than really letting the quorum culture develop and sharing experiences and talking, and then, yeah, sure, we'll get to the conference talk, we'll get there, and it's important, but we don't have to jump right into it, step one. So
yeah, I agree with you. I think that a question up front should be, interesting. That it's not always the expected question. Sometimes you can have kind of a controversial question that still can be related to the gospel, and you don't want to get into a fight with people like they do in church basketball, But it's always amazes me that you can get into a fight, in a church sports event. But I think it's important that people learn how to share experiences and not be afraid, because a lot of people won't speak up because they don't know how to answer that theological question. But if you give an experience and an example, then, I can tell you something that happened to me.
right.
And people might, for the first time in weeks or months, actually, contribute. Otherwise, they don't. You have the same 10. I always talk about the STP in the church, same 10 people.
Yep.
In the quorums, it might be the same 3 people, on the relief side, same 2 people.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it seems like every context has its own STP, right? Like whether there's the 3 people that always give the comments, there's the 10 people that always show up at the canning assignment or whatever it is, right?
And that's wonderful. You don't want to discount that, but we want more people to contribute, right?
Yeah, that definitely makes it easier. Any other point, principle, or concept that quote from your book you want to make sure you fit in here before we wrap up, or did we?
I'm going to put a plug in for my new book that I don't have yet.
Oh,
I'm actually writing a new book.
Awesome.
So in Success Factor 8 of my book, Power of Strategic Influence, it says identify and leverage your competitive competencies. And so what that basically means is that, to become a competent leader, you have to become skillful in many things, not just one thing. But there might be one thing that is your go-to thing that you can call your superpower. That's what I like to call it. That people, they'll become your legacy. I spoke in Chicago to a group of leaders a few weeks ago. And the first question I asked them, I said, have any of you ever been in the presence of greatness before? Have you ever met someone who was the GOAT, the best of the best of something? And I had, those 2 people in the crowd that raised their hand. Yeah, I've been there. I said, well, I don't care that you actually did it, but if you've been inspired by someone, the question I have for you is, did you do something with it? Did it just inspire you and it made you feel good, or did you actually take it constructively and do something with that inspiration that influenced you, that impacted you at that moment? And did you do it soon? Because if you don't do it soon, you'll forget what inspired you. Remember, there was something good they said, you will not remember it, especially a week or 2 later. So you immediately, maybe you write it down, you immediately try to teach it. And then third, how do you put that into practice, into your own life? So that's what I'm all about right now, is how do we become masters of our future, which means becoming competent in many things that we care about. Benjamin Franklin taught him a valuable lesson when he was on this earth. Remarkable person who at the end of his life said, I never perfected what I wanted to perfect.
Hmm.
I mean, he was so critical of himself. He had 13 vices that he wanted to turn into virtues, and his only goal in life was to master his character. Most people want to master one little thing. He wanted to master a category, this guy.
Yeah.
He was amazing. So I think that's important to lead by example, but to learn that if you want to become a person that's influential, do it through example, things you've learned, things you've mastered, things that you've become competent in, so that you can actually help people in many ways. And you don't have to become perfect in every way, and certainly Christ was, but the rest of us are just trying to become okay at a lot of things. But you might become really good at one thing, and people come to you, and you become really important to people in that aspect in your
Yeah.
life for the rest of your life.
And I imagine those things are different for different people, right? Or for different leaders, right?
Yeah, so I did a survey. I should tell you, I did a survey of hundreds of people in the United States for my first book to get those competencies, and I came up with a top 10 list. I've continued to do that for the last 2 years. Now I've surveyed over 1,000 people worldwide, and we came up with a top 40 list. I can have a top 50 list, but I like 40 better because of the music industry. And now, so because of Benjamin Franklin, because he had 13 virtues that fit perfectly into 1 year, 4 times, he could practice, go through all 13. So I have a list of top 13, I call it competencies. You can take my 13 or you can take any that you think are important, but I give a list of 40 so you can kind of pick and choose, even
Oh,
though,
cool.
1,000 people said these 13 are the best, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I meant sometimes you see in the church where you see the superpowers that were in that Relief Society president right before you were called, and then you're called, and you sort of beat yourself up that you don't have those superpowers, but to recognize you have other superpowers and
yeah.
you should lean into those, right?
Yeah. I mean, who was it? President Grant. My dad met President Grant when he was a little boy. My dad grew up in Hinckley, Utah. They built a new church. And he'd just gotten baptized. My dad had gotten on a horse. His parents, on a farm, they couldn't go to church that day. They had some problem on the farm. My dad got on his horse, went to church, tied up his horse, went in, sat on the back row because he was a little bit late. And then another man came in and sat right next to him, who ended up being President Heber J. Grant.
Oh, wow.
And he wanted to become good at calligraphy, at singing, all these great things. Like Benjamin Franklin, he had these things he wanted to acquire, and so people admired him for that.
Yeah.
Apparently, he was a terrible singer before he learned how to sing,
Yeah.
but he learned how to sing and actually be gratified by his skill.
Yeah.
So,
Same with his penmanship, right? I mean,
and his penmanship.
you look at his signature, wow, impressive. He
It is impressive. I've lost that skill. I was better when I was a kid at writing than I am today
well,
because I type everything.
now we tap on little screens, and
We do.
unfortunately, so awesome. Well,
Thanks,
Gary,
Kurt, for all those great questions. I appreciate
yeah,
it.
Gary, this has been fantastic. Really appreciate the perspective, the research you've done, the experience you've gained, and glad you're putting it in pages of a book and whatnot. And obviously, people can go to Amazon. Is that the best place to find the power of strategic influence?
You can buy it directly from me if you want it signed. You can come to GaryCLaney.com.
Okay.
And I don't divulge what this middle C stands for because it was my dad's middle name. He didn't like it. He gave it to me for some reason. I didn't like it. But GaryCLaney.com. You can go there, or Amazon, of course. But if you want it signed, I don't charge a lot to do that. You can do it, and I'll ship it to you, include shipping.
Yeah.
You can also go to the title of the book, The Power of Strategic Influence.com.
Right.
And hopefully by this fall or early spring next year, I'll have another book out. So
Awesome. Well, Gary, the last question I have for you, as you reflect on your time as a leader, how has being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
oh my gosh, I mean, the ultimate desire to become a leader is to be like him, right? Because he didn't have to push, compel, force people to do anything. They followed him. I mean, that's the true sense of a follower because of his teaching, because of his example, because of his love. I like this song that wasn't written by anybody in our church, but it's called "I Can Only Imagine." It's my favorite
Oh, yeah.
song. I love that song by Mercy Me. And you can imagine what it'd be like to be in his presence again someday. I mean, I want to help lead people to that presence. I mean, that's it.